I guess, in a way of introduction, if you can give us in 25 words or more a little bit about your career, Mr. Effros.
Well, the way I started trumpet, I lived in Memphis, Tennessee, and one day we moved into an old house that belonged to a Confederate general who had passed away. And I went up in the attic one day and I found an army bugle. I started blowing on that. So my father says, "Son, you like music, don't you?" I said, "Yes." He says, "What would you like to play?" So I said, "I think cornet." So that night he brought home a cornet. I took 8 lessons on the cornet. And they had a band. He belonged to the Moose Club. It was like the Elks. And they used to play on Sundays. So I'd sit in the last chair and I'd watch the guy next to me. And if he pressed on the first valve, I'd press on my first valve, and then I'd look at the music to see what note it was. And that's how I started playing.
Right.
And then I worked on excursion boats. And we used to work with a lot of the fellas from New Orleans. They used to come up to the season. We used to go down there. And then I learned how to play Dixieland music. And we used to play with a calliope, the steam calliope, or a calliope as you may call it. And that's how I attained a very large tone. And I came to Memphis, and I came to New York in 1920, and everybody wanted me. In 1921, I went to work for Vincent Lopez. I was with him until 27. That's when commercial radio started. Tommy Dorsey and Jimmy Dorsey and Xavier Cugat were in the band, and we left them to go into commercial radio. And the rest is history. And I started composing.
In putting the show together, it was, usually you have trouble finding records by a particular artist. In the case of putting the show together, picking out music that you were on, it's hard to avoid you. You are on practically everyone's recordings.
I worked with every one of them, all the bands. I used to work with the Metropolitan Opera. I worked on the Lucky Strike Hit Parade. I was on there 15 years with Raymond Scott, Mark Wano, Harry Salter, Harry Sosnick, Bob Herring, and B.A. Rolfe. And I worked with Rubinoff, Leopold Spitalny, Phil Spitalny. And that was before he had his girls' orchestra. And I worked with Rudy Valley. And whenever they'd get a commercial, they'd use us, the same musicians. In the group was Tommy Dorsey, Jimmy Dorsey, Benny Goodman, Glenn Miller, Charlie Spivak. We were all sidemen. And they never used their own orchestra. They were working in nightclubs. And for their commercial, or if they made records, they used us.
Turning our attention for a minute, Mr. Dean, you don't go back quite that far, but...
No, I don't. I'm really not sorry that I don't, because Bobby has quite a background. But the way I got into the music business, I was a baseball player, and I was signed to play professional baseball. And I went away playing baseball for two years, professional baseball, and I had to make some bread, as we say, and I got a job reviewing shows for a publication called the Nightclub Reporter. And I would review several radio shows, and one of the radio shows, several NBC radio shows, and I ripped them up and down pretty good. And the brass at NBC said, "This kid is some wise guy," and they sent for me. I went to see them after the ball season was over, and they immediately signed me up, NBC did, and they put me on the air with a string quartet and a great jazz harpist by the name of Casper Reardon. From then on, they thought that I had more talent than I actually did have, and they sponsored a band for me down at Nick's in Greenwich Village, and I was broadcasting on WEAF. I needed a girl singer, and I auditioned all around, and finally a fellow came over to me, George Simon, and he said, "There's a girl up from Nashville. She doesn't look too good, but she sings great." And it turned out it was Dinah Shore, and so I hired Dinah, and we had quite a swinging band down there at Nick's, and I broadcast from Nick's. And then Glenn Miller came along and said, "I want to start a band for Charlie Spivak," and I realized that I wasn't the best band leader in the world. I was a pretty good business man, and was fairly good with the vocal, and So I organized as the Spivak band, and from then on, I managed many well-known personalities like Peggy Lee, which I'm still managing Peggy, and Paul Whiteman, Charlie Spivak, Teddy Powell, the Heather Tones, the High-Lows, Johnny Nash, many swinging cats, and it's been a very good business, and I've also been in the jingle business, but now I've decided to take care of myself, and so I started to record, and it seems to be catching on. I'm very fortunate. It has caught on, and I've just finished my second album, and I'm preparing my third album now. So that's a thumbnail sketch of Peter Dean, Rich.
Well, you did mention one name in there, in the list of people that you did manage.
Paul Whiteman.
How did the man guess? You mean, is it the same Paul Whiteman who's the king of jazz, dean of modern American music, and sultan of syncopation?
Yeah, Dean, I'm the king of... You cover them all. You cover them all, and...
Oh, my God.
How about that? I'm showing Rich now some cufflinks that Paul Whiteman gave to me. He had several pairs of gold cufflinks made, and one day he came over and bestowed a pair upon me, which was a great tribute. This was after we put together Paul Whiteman's 50th anniversary album, which was quite an opus, I must say.
I saw those cufflinks in an issue of Esquire a couple of years ago. They had some guy all decked out in 20s garb, and there with his Paul Whiteman cufflinks. Magnificent.
Aren't they magnificent? Yeah.
Well, I do want to mention, since I am not the world's greatest interviewer, which is quite obvious to anyone listening, just if you do have any questions, if you think there's any area that I'm not giving sufficient attention to, please give us a call, because that's what we're here for. That's why it's good being at a station like WFUV. It's not so good getting on late, but it is good that we do have that contact with the audience. If there's anything out there that you'd like to ask our guests, you can call us. We won't put you directly on the air with them, because we don't want to get any obscene phone calls. But if you want to call up, we can scribble down your question or comment or whatever, and we'll relay it to our guests. Our number is area code 212-933-2233. Area code 212-933-2233. And when you get our Fordham University switchboard, just ask for the radio station, because that's what we are. Mr. Effros, we are again. We were talking before, and I was really amazed just how expansive your career really was. And you were mentioning something about the original Dixieland Jazz Band, which I guess was one of the first white bands to record jazz.
Well, originally it was called Stein's Dixieland Band, and they played in a place in New Orleans called the Pup Cafe. And someone heard them play and took them to Chicago, and they went to work for Schiller's Cafe. And the head waiter there was a German, and when the customers used to walk in, he used to use a 4-letter German word. He'd say to them, "Listen to that Scheiss." I don't want to translate this on radio. And they had an argument among themselves, and they let Johnny Stein go. And they brought a drummer by the name of Tony Sparbaro. They called him Tony Spargo. And they came to New York, and they went to work in a place called Reisenweber's. And somebody heard them play there, and they went to work for Victor. And they made a record of Tiger Rag and another number called Livery Stable Blues. And when the record came out, they spelled, instead of spelling jazz, J-A-Z-Z, they spelled it J-A-S-S. So they decided to recall all those records, and they didn't like the word Livery Stable Blues, which was a dirty word in those days. So they called it Barnyard Blues. And that's how the Dixieland Jazz Band started.
And
those two numbers.
You filled in occasionally for Nick LaRocca.
You see, I was working in a dance hall called Healy's on Broadway and 65th Street. And when Nick LaRocca wasn't there, I used to play in both bands, and I knew all the Dixieland tunes coming from Memphis. I knew every one of them. And I was off on Sundays, and I used to have a band out in Hopkinson Mansion in Brooklyn on Pitkin Avenue. And it was a fellow by the name of Jimmy Durante used to play piano for me. And I lived on 110th Street in Central Park West, and he lived about 2 blocks from me. And he used to meet me every Sunday, and we'd take the subway out. And I forgot what stop we'd get off, and we'd have to take a crosstown car line. It was one of those old-fashioned open-air car lines with the running boards. And the streetcar was loaded with old Jewish men with long beards that were all on their way to Pitkin Avenue. That was the Broadway in those days. And every Sunday, we'd sit on the rear end of the car, and about 4 or 5 blocks before we get to Pitkin Avenue, Jimmy Durante used to holler, "Pitkin Avenue!" And he used to unload the streetcar every Sunday. And the motorman was wise to it. So he'd start the car off, and first thing you know, when they got off the car, they'd all look around. They realized it wasn't Pitkin Avenue. So they're running after the streetcar and holler, "Wait, wait, 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 wait." So finally the motorman would stop the car, and they'd get right back on the car. And till this day, when Jimmy ever sees me or I see him, he hollers, "Pitkin Avenue."
So,
And incidentally, when I worked in this dance hall, George Raft used to hang out in there, and he was quite a tango dancer, and he looked like Rudy Valentino. And he used to get in all the contests, and he'd win $10, $15. And in 1921, I went to work for Lopez, so George Raft used to run into me. He says, "Well, Bobby, how does it feel to be making all that money?" I said, "Okay," and he'd always hit me for a quarter or half a buck. And many years went by when he became the George Raft. He joined Texas Guinan. She had a nightclub in New York. It was called Texas Guinan's Gang, and she took the whole gang out to the coast. They were all youngsters. And they were working out there, and some producer saw Raft dancing out there, and he called him over, and he asked him if he'd like to go to work for him. So he went to work and made his first picture. So many, many years went by. I was doing a show called a Joe Cook Show. It was like the Sullivan Show, all vaudeville acts. And I walk in, and who's the headliner that night? A guy by the name of George Raft. So I said to the producer, "Where's this Raft guy?" He says, "He's over in that dressing room over there." So I opened the door, and I hit him on the back. I said, "Well, you bum you, how does it feel to be making all that money?" So he screamed. In fact, I have a picture that he gave me that night, and he wrote on it, "My old pal, Bobby Effros, the hottest guy in town," signed George Raft. Your pal, George Raft.
That's a cute story.
how did you come to work with Lopez, or what was it? What kind of band was it?
Lopez heard about me, and I was working in Philadelphia in a dance hall, and one day I got a telegram from him, and it said, "Would you like to join my band? If you're interested, get in touch with me immediately." So I called him up. He says, "Bring your trumpet over." So I brought it over to one of the rehearsals, and he asked me to play a tune. I said, "What do you want me to play?" He says, "How about St. Louis Blues?" So I played St. Louis Blues, and I was hired right then and there.
And you were with him till 1927?
27, that's when commercial radio started. When I was in a band, Tommy Dorsey, Jimmy Dorsey, Cougat were in the band. This was back in 1925. We were going to London, and we opened a nightclub in London called the Kit Kat Club. And someone approached Lopez. He says, "Look, I have a Spanish violinist." He says he's a concert violinist. He can't get himself arrested. Maybe you can use him in the band. So Lopez says, "What do I want with a concert violinist?" He says, "Well, here's the gimmick. He draws caricature pictures. Let him go around the table, draw pictures of the celebrities, and you sign your name, Vincent Lopez, on these pictures." So he went to work, and he says, and let him play once in a while in a band. So he was in a band for a couple of years, and one day business got very bad, so he decided to fire Cougat. Cougat had a brother in California working for Douglas Fairbanks. He used to draw the sets, the designs for the sets for the picture. And he was drawing, working for his brother, and he forgot about the music business. So in those days, when someone would come up with an idea, they put it in the picture. Someone came up with an idea to put a rumba band in the picture. So they went to Cugat. Said, "Do you know anything about rumba music?" He says, "No, nothing." You see, he came from Spain, and they played tangos in Spain and waltzes. He says, "Do you know where we can get any Latin musicians?" He says, "Well, there's a place in L.A. where they hang out." He said, "Tell you what you do. You go over and get about 15 of them, and we'll put them in the picture, and you stand in front of them and hold your violin under your arm, but don't play, just tap off." So they made the picture, and the picture opened at Radio City Music Hall. And one night, there was a man by the name of Lucius Boomer, who was president of the Waldorf Astoria, went in, and he saw this picture. So he went to the manager and said, "Who's that band in the picture?" They didn't give any billing in those days. He said, "There's some fellow by the name of," he said, "Well, I don't know who he is." He says, "Well, call up RKO." So he called up RKO, and they told him it was a fellow by the name of Xavier Cugat. So this Lucius Boomer says, "Tell him to get in touch with me immediately. I want him to open at the Waldorf Astoria," and the rest is history.
Terrific. We're going to have a little bit more music now. I should remind you, you're listening to WFUV in New York at 90.7 FM. You're listening to the Big Broadcast. My name is Rich Conaty. I'm the youthful and handsome star of the Big Broadcast, your radio grandson of the air. And we have two guests with us tonight, Mr. Bob Effros, who you just heard, a trumpet player who goes back as far as I guess you could possibly go back.
When Jesus was a Boy Scout.
And Mr. Peter Dean, who has a couple of albums that we'll be hearing from him further. And, this is WFUV. I said that. We gave our ID. And now we're going to hear one of your own compositions, Bob. We're going to hear Tin Ear, a piano-trumpet duet. I think this recorded around 1928?
Yeah, Brunswick.
Which tape? Is that, you're asking me which tape? Okay. It's the 1 second. No, the one that we started with. The very first tape we played tonight. That one. It's Tin Ear, We Trust.
doorstep, look at my doorstep, look at the bluebirds, look at the blackbirds, look at the good luck, look at the bad luck. Look at the good luck and the bad luck there. Wit never knew bluebirds, knew any blackbirds, never knew blackbirds, mingle with bluebirds, never knew good luck, ever could perch out there. I overheard those birdies talking. This is what they had to say. Now first the bluebird said, we gotta have sunny weather. So the bluebirds and the blackbirds got together. And now the blackbird said, we're birds of a different feather. So the bluebirds and the blackbirds got together. Now when they talked it over, they let the bluebirds bring the rain. And then the blackbirds all agreed to bring the sunshine back again. But you can't have rain or sunshine that lasts forever. So the bluebirds and the blackbirds got together. Trouble, trouble round my door. Blackbirds, blackbirds by the score. Bluebirds, bluebirds came one day and said to the blackbirds, hear our say. Now first the bluebird said, we gotta have sunny weather. But you can't have rain or sunshine that lasts forever. Whip-a-boo-boo. You can take the bluebird, you take the blackbird, you mix them together, you get fair weather. And that's the reason the bluebirds and the blackbirds got together.
So I never take her where the gang goes when I take my sugar to tea. Every Sunday afternoon we forget about our cares, rubbing elbows at the Ritz with the millionaires. When I take my sugar to tea, I'm as ritzy as I can be, 'cause I never take her where the gang goes when I take my sugar to tea. Take my sugar to tea.
When I Take My Sugar to Tea. That's Harry Reser's radio band from 1931. Before that, we heard Peter Dean doing So the Bluebirds and the Blackbirds Got Together, a tune made famous by the Rhythm Boys. It was featured in the film The King of Jazz, which starred the King of Jazz, and singing with Mr. Dean is his niece, Carly Simon. And we opened with a duet between Mr. Effros and Arthur Schutt from 1928, Mr. Effros' own composition of Tin Ear. You're listening to The Big Broadcast, and I'm Rich Conaty. And as I said before, if you have any questions, if you think there's any areas that I'm not covering that you'd like to ask a question, call us up at 933-2233 and ask for the radio station. Area code 212-933-2233. Mr. Effros.
Yes.
I think you have a story about Vincent Lopez and telegrams.
Yes. When we worked at the Pennsylvania Hotel, he used to get a lot of fan mail. We were on the networks coast to coast every night. And he used to get a lot of fan mail. So one day, I was talking to a lady who used to run the Western Union office in the lobby of the Pennsylvania Hotel, and I said, do you mind if I send Lopez a telegram and double talk? She says, no, we'll deliver with a messenger. So I used to send him all kinds of crazy telegrams. One time I sent him a telegram. I wrote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I signed it 10. Another time I sent him a telegram. It was supposed to be from an attorney in Cincinnati. He says, Dear Mr. Lopez, a fan of yours just passed away, and he mentioned her name, and she left you $250,000. And I tipped all the fellows off in the band about this telegram. And we saw him open it, and he nearly went through the floor. And all night, he was going from table to table and showing all the customers this telegram that someone left him $250,000.
Bobby, that's cruel.
No mercy. Mr. Dean.
Yes, sir.
Sitting here at my left hand. Let's see. How does one get into band management? How did you?
Well, actually, I think it was the lesser of two evils when I found out that I really wasn't, by the captains, a great captain, a great band leader, because I wasn't a good arranger or that good a musician. I decided that I wanted to stay in the business, and it just sort of, I segued into management, and I'm very grateful that it worked out that way. And when I went in the Army in 1941, I had all the band leaders came over and wanted to do something for Peter Dean, which was wonderful. Benny Goodman came over, Pops came over, Paul Whiteman, that is, and we just had all the band leaders, all the bands came over, even Blue Baron, Art Mooney, the whole crowd, and I was really quite gratified that. All these boys wanted to come over, and I had made arrangements with Tommy Dorsey to stay at Fort Dix and take care of show business in Fort Dix. But before I went into the Army, I got into a bridge game with a colonel who was in charge of Chief of Staff of the First Army, and he liked the way I played bridge, and he said, "Wouldn't you like to come to Governor's Island?" So I was transported to Governor's Island, and I stayed there in charge of show business. It was very fortunate, and athletics. And when I came out of the Army, I had made all these marvelous connections, so I just decided to stay in the management end of things, and business was very good. And of course, when Whiteman came and knocked on the door and said to my mother, "I've been watching your son operate, and do you mind if I hang my hat here the rest of my days?" Well, my mother almost fainted, and so did I. And then a few weeks later, Ellington came, and the Duke came in, and I commissioned Ellington to compose a piece of music for a concert that I was producing for Columbia Artist Management, which toured the United States, the universities of the United States, and that was a very successful concert. We had some great players on that, guys like Buck Clayton and many. Joya Sherrill, girls sang with Duke, and Abe Most on clarinet. And so I loved it. Although I always wanted to perform, I really never had the chance to do it because I was always making a buck and swinging with the bands. And I did, when I was with Spivak, I did a little dancing. But that got to be too popular, and they decided they better cut that out.
Well, what were the things that you listened to, either when you were growing up or?
Oh, well, when I was growing up, of course, the first thing I was really taken by was Ellington. I would listen to the Duke from the Cotton Club. I was in high school, and Duke used to come on 1 o'clock on CBS in the morning, and I had to be in class at like 9 o'clock the next day. But nevertheless, I had my head in the radio. We had a huge radio in those days, and you could almost close the doors around your ears. And I would hear Ellington come on with East St. Louis Toodaloo, and I can't remember, I must have been about 14 or 15, and I was digging the good sounds then. And then I went to the Savoy Ballroom up in Harlem. Every Friday night we started a club, and we went up there and we learned how to jitterbug, and we were good dancers. And so it was really in my blood. I had to stay in the business, had to stay in the music business. And then I'd play hooky and go down and hear Benny Goodman at the Paramount, and I just had to be in the band business, you know. So that's been my story, more or less. I've been rather successful in the jingle business. I managed a fellow by the name of Buddy Weed, who's an excellent composer, arranger, pianist, conductor, and Buddy and I did very well in the jingle business. The first commercial we ever did was Jello. You probably remember that.
Sure.
That was for Young and Rubicam. We did that, and then more recently we did Eastern Airlines, number one to the sun, and we've had a lot of success in the jingle business.
And now, if we can switch gears from the swing era to the jazz age.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed.
Mr. Effros, you were, it's interesting, talking to Mr. Dean about the people that he grew up listening to, but I guess when you were growing up, there wasn't really that much around recorded-wise, but, who were the people that you came in contact with back when you were growing up in Memphis?
In Memphis, well, I was playing on an excursion boat, and instead of a piano, we had a calliope, or a calliope, as you may call it. And I used to be off weekends, and I used to play for dances. And then I became a purser on a cotton boat. And then we came up to New York in 1920. And I didn't know a soul in New York. So I knew the W.C. Handy, who knew me when I was a little kid in Memphis. He had a publishing business in New York in the Gaiety Building on Broadway. So I went up to ask him if he could fix me with a job. So he got me my first job in a dance hall. Many years later, I became an official of Local 802. I was on executive board. I was up there 10 years. And as soon as I got in to 802, I made it my business, excuse me, to have him made an honorary member of Local 802 and an honorary member of the Memphis Local, of all locals. They didn't take any blacks in those days, and I had him made an honorary member. So we all went up to his home. He had a beautiful home up in Yonkers, New York. And they all were making speeches, and we presented him with the honor cards. So they asked me to make a speech. So I told them there was a dance hall in Memphis called Lanier's Merry Gardens. And one night, W.C. Handy came up the back stairs, and he walked over to the leader. And the leader says, tell me, why do you come up the back stairs? You're as good as anybody else. Why don't you come up the front stairs? So Handy said to the leader, well, I didn't want to start any trouble. I thought I'd come up here and ask you if you could do me a favor. I said, well, what is it? What's on your mind? He said, I just wrote a tune. I have the lead sheet on it. It's a tune called St. Louis Blues. And I wonder if you'd be kind enough to play it. I want to hear what it sounded like. So the leader played this tune, and that leader happened to be me. And I looked over at Handy. I said, is that right, W.C.? He said, and how that's right.
Bobby,
I was the first one to play St. Louis Blues.
In those days, didn't they have a separate union for the black musicians called
Yes.
ACO, the All
Yes,
Colored Outfit.
they had
yeah.
in some cities they had black locals.
Black locals, yeah.
But of course today we're
I know when I went to the Savoy Ballroom, they had in those days all black local.
yeah.
But in the days of Chick Webb and those marvelous bands, yeah.
And incidentally, I got together with a group of ASCAP. I belonged to ASCAP. And we went to Washington, and we got them to put a stamp out with W.C. Handy's picture on it. It was called The Father of the Blues. And I still have those stamps.
Terrific. Well, right now we're going to have another musical interlude. And when we return from that, we're going to be covering the unlikely combination, or our subjects will include Joe Venuti and Thomas Edison. So, but before that, we're going to hear a recording by Jan Garber's band from 1928. Once again, it's Mr. Effros' composition of Tinier.
Good for nothing but love, never thinking of nothing but love. Each day that chick's got a new way to love. Heavens above, how she can love. Her lips are noted, they're sugar-coated, so sweet they take my breath. And when she holds me, squeezes and folds me, seems like she loves me to death. Her arms, they fit me just like a glove, never thinking of nothing but love. lips are noted, they're sugar-coated, so sweet they take my breath. And when she holds me, squeezes and folds me, hey boy, she loves me to death. Her arms, they fit me like a glove, never thinking of nothing but love, love, love. Love, love, love.
My Gal's Good for Nothing But Love, a Fats Waller composition with a story attached to it, and that was Peter Dean. And we opened with Tin Ear, Bob Effros' composition, Jan Garber's band from 1928. You're listening to the Big Broadcast, and my name is Rich Conaty. And I'd appreciate getting a phone call if you have any kind of question or comment to direct at either myself or either of my guests tonight. Our number, area code 212-933-2233. Ask for the radio station when you get the switchboard, 933-2233. Next week, we have another special big broadcast for you. Hopefully, we'll be going on at 9 o'clock. Oh, by the way, tonight we are going to go until 11:30 because we did get on a half hour late, but even that doesn't make up for the fact that a lot of people who tune in at 9 o'clock aren't going to wait around till 9:30 in the hope that the show will be going on eventually. But next week we should be on at 9 o'clock. If we're not, we'll be on at 9:05. Forgive me, we have 5 minutes of news at 9 o'clock from now on. But 9:05 we'll be here with a special big broadcast. We'll have two guests, Bill Pappas and Mike Sambach. And we'll be doing an all 78 show, which we'll be taping during the week with some sweeter type music. Generally we play more jazz or jazzy music. Next week we'll be going sweet. Mr. Dean.
Yes, sir.
Some anecdotes.
Mm-hmm. On that, the Fats Waller tune, My Gal's Good for Nothing But Love, as you probably don't know, but I have quite a collection of 78s. I'd say I have around 3,000 to 4,000 records. And most of my 78s, I must say, is Ellington. And I put on a lot of Ellington records, and I lie down and listen to them. And one night this tune came on, My Gal's Good for Nothing But Love. You know, when you have as many 78s as I have, you don't get to play them all the time, so you really forget what you have. Well, this came on, and I said, my goodness, that sounds like a good tune for me. And I got up and I stopped the machine, and I played it again and again, and I thought it was just perfect for me. So the next day I tried to get a copy of that song. Nobody could help me out, Fats Wall and Nancy Razov. So I called ASCAP, and ASCAP couldn't help me out. And I know that Fats usually published through Mills, so I called up Mills, and no, they don't have any song, My Gal's Good for Nothing But Love. Well, I said, in case you run across it, please call me, because I'm very much interested in the song. Well, the exact title of that song was called My Guy is Good for Nothing But Love, and originally it was sung by a girl. Fats had written it for a girl. But on the Ellington record, it was My Gal is Good for Nothing But Love. And originally Fats had written for a girl to sing it to a boy. Well, about 2 weeks later, I got a call from the publisher and said, Pete, I think we've uncovered the song in the archives out in Long Island somewhere. And I said, well, please send me a couple of copies. And we finally got the song and recorded it. So that's that story, and I love the tune. But I just want to tell you a little bit about this soprano summit. The other day, I went to the Jazz Museum to hear a concert, and I know Bob Wilbur. He's on my album, as a matter of fact, and we know Bob has played with the world's greatest jazz band, and Kenny DeVerne is a very proficient musician, a fine jazz player. Well, I went to the Jazz Museum to hear these boys, the Soprano Summit, and I just couldn't believe it. It is the most exciting thing that I've heard in jazz in many years, and I literally mean years. I can't remember when I've heard as much excitement come out of 4 or 5 guys as comes out of these guys, and I just couldn't believe it. And so they sent me an album, and I'm getting it played a little bit around for them, and I see they sent you one, and I want to tell everybody who can hear this group, latch on to them wherever they are. And John Wilson, the eminent critic of the New York Times, called their LP, this LP that you just heard one selection from, the Jazz LP of the Year. And I really think it is. These boys have a brilliant future, and I'm so happy that the news is getting around.
And this is on World Jazz Records.
That's correct.
Right. With Dick Hyman, Bob Rosengarten, Bucky Pizzarelli, George Duvivier, I say that right?
Right, you did.
And Milt Hinton.
Right.
Okay, so watch for that. We'll be hearing some other things from that later on. We did get 2 calls with questions directed to Mr. Effros. The first was any stories or reminiscences about Bix Beiderbecke?
Well, I don't remember too many stories, but he was playing the Camel Hour, and he was on it just 2 weeks, and he passed away, and I took his place. Charlie Previn conducted it. That was Andrew Previn's uncle, and I took Bix's place on the Camel Hour.
So he was pretty well downhill by then.
Yeah, he was very sick.
Yeah, and Leo McConville was in the band at the same time.
Yes.
Then? Oh, and secondly, someone called up regarding any of your tunes that might be available, for piano.
Well, I have a lot of them at home, but you'd have to get them from the publisher. Spear and Kozlow published most of them.
Mm-hmm. And they're in Manhattan?
They're in Manhattan, yes.
Okay.
Spear and Kozlow.
Okay. Let's see. What else shall we talk about? Let's see. Let me think here. Any questions? All right. Of course. Thomas Edison.
Oh. I used to work for Thomas Edison, and he was very hard of hearing. When we'd make a record, it was put on wax, and then he'd hear the playback, and he used to have a long tin horn. He used to put it by his ear to listen to the record. So one day I said to him, Mr. Edison, they just came out with hearing aids. Why don't you try one? He says, oh, no. He says, it can't be any good. I didn't invent it. And he never used a hearing aid. And I have another story on him. In those days, he made the cylinder records, and he made flat records. And on the 10-inch flat records, he got 3 minutes of music, which was the same as any other record company. 3 minutes of music on a 10-inch record. And the reason why they could only get 3 minutes of music is that they used what was called a lateral cut. And he invented a new cut called the Hill and Dale, which they use today in the long-playing records. So he was able to get 4 minutes of music on a 10-inch record. And he started selling these records, and all the companies started copying. So one day he called us into his office. He says, fellas, I want to read a letter to you that I just got from some farmer out in the Midwest. And the farmer says, "Dear Mr. Edison, you have a hell of a goddamn nerve to advertise 4 minutes of music on a 10-inch record." He says, "I've been buying the records. They had 4 minutes of music, but I bought one record," and he named the artist who made it. He said, "And this record only had 3 minutes of music." And he says, and the way I found out it had 3 minutes of music, I used my records for boiling eggs. And every time I put this record on, I used to get a soft-boiled egg.
Cute story.
You know, I know when from speaking to you, it's just incredible the amount of records you did, or the amount of radio shows, and because radio, with almost no exceptions, is all recorded music. Maybe you could just tell us. I mean, you worked an incredible amount. I mean, how many programs would you be doing in a typical week?
Well, at one time I had 39 shows a week. Now, when I say 39, in those days, we'd play a show, say 8 o'clock or 8:30 or 9 or 9:30. Then we'd have to repeat the show at midnight for the West Coast. See, today they use tapes, and they just play the tape. But we had to come back again to play the show.
You sound like
we got
Manny
an extra
Klein.
fee for that. Yeah.
You sound like Manny Klein.
Manny Klein.
I used to see him going from one studio to the other.
Well, that's
Pete,
what I
I'll see
did.
you later. I got to be on the air in 5 minutes.
You know, there was a leader asked me one day, I said, "Bob, I have a date open next Thursday afternoon for a broadcast. Can you make it?" So I looked at my book. I says, "I can make everything but the rehearsal and the broadcast."
You see, the good musicians, Rich, as Bobby was, they were in demand to do all the radio shows. The bands weren't steady. They were studio bands, like NBC had a house band and CBS had a house band. So all the good musicians would be on all the shows, and they'd go from one show to the other show to the other show. It was really fantastic to watch them.
Well, how could you?
We had to play any type of music. With
also.
Nat Chilkret, we used to make records with the Metropolitan Opera. And we read its sight, transposed its sight. And I used to work with George Gershwin. I have stories on George Gershwin. Would you like to hear?
Sure.
We were doing a show with George Gershwin for Finament. And he was master of ceremonies, and he used to play the piano solos. And we had a man by the name of Louis Katzman from Brunswick Records. He used to conduct the orchestra. It was about a 40-piece orchestra. So one day, you know, all the shows that George Gershwin composed, he didn't score one show. He didn't know how to score, but he was a perfectionist. Whatever he took up, he went through with it. So he said to me one day, "Bob," he said, "I'm going over to Paris to write an American in Paris." And he used to write a lead sheet, and then Freddie Groffey of Whiteman's band used to make the score. He says, "While I'm in Paris, I'd like to meet Maurice Ravel and take some lessons with him." Maurice Ravel was one of the tops for scoring, besides composing. So he was over there about 3 months and came back. I says, "George, by the way, did you meet Maurice Ravel over there?" So he started to laugh. He said, "Yeah, I met him. I told him I'd like to study with him." So Maurice Ravel says, "You're George Gershwin, aren't you?" He says, "Yes." He says, "Oh, my God, I heard so much about you. Tell me, how much do you make a year, George?" So Gershwin said to him about $250,000, which he was making. So Maurice Ravel said, I'd like to study with you. Incidentally, I gave this story to Walter Winchell. It was in his column. So he studied with Maurice Ravel about 3 months, and he came back here and he studied with a refugee by the name of Schillinger. And he studied with him about 3 or 4 months, and then he decided to score the first show of his life. And what was it? Porgy and Bess, which was the last show that he composed. And he used to bring parts while scoring it. He'd bring parts in, and he'd say to us during the rehearsal, it wasn't broadcast. He says, fellas, do me a favor, run over this. I want to hear what it sounds like. And there was never any titles on it. So one day he passed out about 64 bars, something very fast. And we played it, and we got through. I said, gee, George, it sounds like somebody gets killed. Well, he was dumbstruck. He says, you want to know something? While this is being played, there's a black that gets stabbed to death. Porgy.
I love you,
So
Porgy.
the show opened, and it was panned. And the show ran about 3 months. And he went to California, and he developed a tumor of the brain. And I called him up out there in the hospital about 3 days after the operation. I said, George, how do you feel? He says, oh, I'll be all right. 3 days later, he was dead. He's buried here in Westchester. It's a non-sectarian cemetery, and that's where Victor Herbert is buried also.
Mr. Dean, just from listening to Bob Effros about, I guess studio work was very good to the musicians. How was it possible as a band manager to coax musicians out of the studio and onto the road?
Well, that was very difficult. Once the musicians saw the green of the studios, it was very difficult to lure them out of the studio and to go like with a Charlie Spivak or even to go on the road with a Glenn Miller. Of course, Glenn didn't travel that much. Glenn found a home at the Statler and made his killing there. But it was very difficult. I remember trying to get the guys to leave town to go with Spivak, and it was a real hazard. We had to offer them all kinds of inducements. If we wanted like a good lead alto man, which you must have, and a good first trumpet player, which you must have, and a good pianist rhythm section. It was really very difficult. The only reason we were able to do it is that Glenn Miller was behind them and behind us, and we all felt that, maybe there's gold in them hills after all, and things can happen. Of course, Charlie was a magnificent trumpet player. We had a slogan, Charlie Spivak, the man who plays the sweetest trumpet this side of heaven. Something like the Guy Lombardo, the man who plays the sweetest music this side of heaven. But Charlie had a mute that he christened and ordained himself, and it was a little different than most mutes. It was a little sweeter, and there was nobody who could blow better trumpet than Spivak. He was really an incredible artist. A ballad, not jazz. And the other, like Teddy Powell, when I was managing Teddy's band, the same thing. To get guys to go out of town was almost impossible. To go with Whiteman was another story, because we would just do concerts with Whiteman. We wouldn't go out on any location job. What we'd do is go to a various town, Pittsburgh or Toronto or Chicago, and we would pick up the symphony players there. So it wasn't that was very easy. And we'd just take a few key musicians along with us, like a fellow to play the Rhapsody in Blue most of the time, Buddy Weed, or a great trumpet player like Muggsy, or whomever we felt we needed, and whoever Whiteman felt he needed. I was supposed to be Whiteman's manager, but he managed me. Say, Pete, do this, and of course that's how you learn from those guys.
At what point was Whiteman's career when you stepped into it?
Well, Whiteman, when he knocked on the door, when they rang the doorbell, and he was then musical director of the American Broadcasting Company. And I immediately, one of the best things I ever did for the old man was I heard that Jackie Gleason was going to start a show called America's Greatest Bands, and I got in touch with Jackie through Jack Philbin, and I said, wouldn't it be right to have the old man, Whiteman, who started this whole thing, be the master of ceremonies? And they agreed rather readily, and we negotiated a nice deal, and that was how Whiteman got that position. And, of course, he was able to hang on at ABC, even though this was on CBS. I do want to tell you a rather interesting story. You know, Joe Venuti, the great jazz fiddle player, was with Whiteman. And when I put together the Whiteman's 50th anniversary album, and that was, I think, one of the marvelous albums that sold for $10, and I think it grossed something like $10 million. And we had Tommy Dorsey, Joe Venuti, Jimmy Dorsey, Bing Crosby, the Rhythm Boys, you know, just everybody, Buddy Weed, Jack Teagarden. I'll never forget Jack was so down in his luck at the time, I had to send him $750 so he could come east and make this album. Well, Venuti, such a character. Maybe I'm sure that Bobby's heard this story. When Whiteman conducted down at the Mardi Gras down in New Orleans, he would come out. Everything was dark, but Whiteman had this big electric light on his baton. And when he would raise the baton, that light would go up and all the musicians could see it, and naturally they came in on the downbeat. Well, Venuti was playing opposite Whiteman down there. And the next night, Venuti comes in with a big truck and a telegraph pole with a huge electric light on the end of it. And he has about 3 people lift up this electric telegraph pole. He comes down with it up. He was the greatest kidder and practical joker in the business. What a fun man he was, and what a great fiddle player. I negotiated an album for Joe called Fiddle on Fire, which I think is one of the masterpieces, if you can find it.
Yeah, they turn up once in a while.
Yeah.
He's supposed to be coming to New York again. I don't know when. I saw him last year. It was terrific.
Well, he was at the Downbeat last
recently.
year. Yeah, at the Downbeat.
Yeah.
I saw him at Michael's Pub. It was Michael's Pub.
Michael's Pub. Mm-hmm.
He's supposed to be here. He was supposed to be here this month, and now I called him. He's supposed
No.
to maybe June or something.
Yeah, I think it'll be later on. A funny man, and what a player. You Bobby, you must remember Eddie Lang and
very
Joe.
well.
Yeah, Eddie, who wasn't the greatest musician, not great reader.
No,
He couldn't read very well, but
You know,
boy, he
when
could
I was
play.
in Lopez's band, we had a banjo player that resigned. So I thought of Eddie Lang because I heard him play in Philadelphia when I was working over there. So I called him up. I said, Eddie, would you like to join Lopez's band? He said, I'm sorry, Bob, I can't. I said, why? He said, I can't read music. He couldn't
No,
read.
he couldn't read, but
he
what
had
an
an
ear.
ear like nobody had.
Fantastic. They were a great combo,
Yeah.
Eddie Lang and Joe Venuti.
Do you have any broadcastable Joe Venuti stories?
Well, I have some I wouldn't dare tell on this.
Oh, Joe, it's
It's
incredible.
because it would be bleeped.
Yes.
I have a lot of stories. Maybe you'd like to hear a story of things that happened in Lindy's restaurant.
Sure.
See, Lindy's, all the musicians, actors, gamblers, publishers, they used to hang out in Lindy's. And you never know what was going to happen there. And Dick Himber, who was an orchestra leader, lived in the Park Central Hotel, which was about 2 blocks from Lindy's.
The pyramid music of
Yeah, pardon?
the pyramid music of
Yes.
Richard Himber.
Richard Himber.
Yeah.
So he was quite a practical joker. So one day the air conditioning went off in Lindy's. It was about 7 o'clock at night and the place was jammed. So all of a sudden, one of the phones rang in a phone booth and the head waiter answered. So the voice on the other end said, "This is Dick Himber calling. I'm running a party of about 40 people up in the hotel, but I want Lindy to take this order." So the head waiter says, "Well, can't you give it to me?" He says, "No, I want Lindy to take this order." So they got Lindy in the phone booth. So he says, "Send me so many corned beef sandwiches, so many pastrami's." He says, "Hold that. So many salamis." He kept changing the order all around, and he had Lindy in there about about a half hour, and Lindy was going out of his mind. It was so hot. So then he got to the desserts. He says, send me so many cheesecakes. He says, hold that. So many Danish, change that around. And so finally Lindy says, look, Dick, I can't take this anymore. You don't know what's going on. I've got to get out of this phone booth. So Himba says, all right, send it right up. So Lindy stepped out of the phone booth, and Himba stepped out of the next phone booth, and he looked at Lindy and says, don't forget the mustard.
Right now, I think we're going to have another musical interlude. And if you do have any questions, now would be the time to call up, and we'll copy them down and ask them during our next break, okay? I think I'll do an ID now. This is WFUV in New York at 90.7 FM. You're listening to the big broadcast, by the way, and my name is Rich Conaty. Right now we're going to hear the other side of that piano trumpet duet that Bob Effros did. This time he's being accompanied by Frank Signorelli, known to his friends as Cheech. This is a recording from 1928, Sweet and Hot.